If you're in the construction industry, and especially if you are a CEO or a leader of a manufacturer of offsite building materials, then you probably know this frustration very well. You have created and engineered a product that is proven, it is stronger, it's better quality. You have the case studies to prove it. You have, testimonials from other builders that have tried it. You have checked all of the boxes of a superior building material for either commercial or residential buildings. You have done all of it. It is a fantastic product. However, every time you have a conversation with a prospect or a builder or a contractor, it always feels like an uphill battle. It always feels like you're working so hard to try and convince them that this is a great product. And they keep just falling back to the old traditional methods and going, we've always done this. I think I'm just going to use what I've been using. And the same conversation keeps happening over and over. And you've probably thought to yourself, how can I get the industry to change? What can we do to flip a switch so that the builders and contractors can start to see what I'm seeing? And because I work with so many professionals in this industry, so many CEOs of building manufacturing companies, I hear it all the time and I see it all the time in talks on LinkedIn, on other platforms. We want the industry to change. It's been a long time coming. It's been 2 decades. We're waiting for the industry to change. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about what I tell my clients about change in the industry, about what's coming and what's not coming. Because as I'm going to talk about in this video, the industry is not going to change. And we'll get into all of that. But I'm going to talk about what I tell my clients so they can kind of put themselves in a place where they can continue to grow their business and they can continue to get adoption of their products and sell and grow predictably and profitably despite all of the kind of frustrations they feel about change in the industry. If we haven't met before, my name is Angie Mina and I am a marketing consultant in the construction industry. I work with building materials manufacturers that are between maybe $3 to $5 million in annual revenue and looking to grow to and past $10 million. I help them position their business so they can get adoption of their products, so they can get bigger projects, so they can grow and double their sales in 12 months or less. And so let's talk about change, because the hard truth is that change does not happen the way you think it happens. There is no such thing as industry-wide change that's going to happen. There is no such thing as you're going to wake up, one day and the industry will have changed. And again, I see all these posts on LinkedIn all the time. And by the way, if you're not following me on LinkedIn, please find me on LinkedIn. I am there all the time. I participate in discussions. I post my own opinions. Let's talk and let's kind of get to the bottom of some of these topics. So yes, any type of large scale change, either in societies or in industries or in countries, happens one individual at a time. The way that people change their behavior is not a collective thing. It is an individual, person by person, because they have made that decision. Either they have an incentive or they're running away from some sort of pain. They will make that individual choice to change their behavior. And then the person next to them will change and the person next to them will change. And then, at some point, we're going to notice that collectively, either the industry has changed or the society has changed. And the reason I say this all the time is because many companies and many manufacturers think that it has something to do with either their message or their product or the way that they speak, the marketing channels that they have chosen. And it has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with the functional benefits of your product, the way that your product performs. It has nothing to do with all of that. And so the question that we should all be focusing on is, knowing that change happens one individual at a time, is which individuals influence other individuals to change. Which individual, once they adopt a new behavior or a new product or a new idea, are being watched by other people to see how they're going to react to it, what their result is going to be. Which influential individuals are going to then cause change in other individuals to where at some point the whole system is going to change. That's what we need to be focused on. And so with that idea in mind, I'm going to pause here and tell you a story. This story happens in Iowa in the 1930s, and corn farmers at the time are struggling financially because of low yields that are caused by severe drought. And while this is happening, some agricultural researchers have developed a hybrid seed, one that is better resistant to drought, resistant to common diseases, and actually produces a higher yield. And once tested, the results weren't marginal. It wasn't a small difference. The yields were dramatically higher. The resistance to drought was significant. The resistance to diseases. There were so many huge benefits to the farmers from this new hybrid seed that was developed. And so you would think at the time that every single corn farmer would be rushing to get this new seed. But that's not what happened. Even with the evidence being clear, even with all the numbers being dramatically higher in terms of the economics, the yields, the resistance to diseases and to drought, the adoption was extremely slow and frustrating. Most of the farmers were skeptical. They just did not believe it. Some of them complained that the new seed was more expensive, and others were just comfortable doing what they had always done. Sound familiar? And so the researchers and the agricultural sector at the time, they doubled down on educational seminars and even subsidizing the seed to the farmers that needed the subsidies. And they just went hard on education campaigns. And that didn't work either. Adoption was still very, very, very slow. And it's not because the message was wrong. And it's not because of the way that they were presenting it. It's because of one simple thing. It was the messenger. The farmers just quite plainly did not trust who this message was coming from. And so here's where it gets interesting. A sociologist named Everett Rogers, years and years and years after, the hybrid seed had been adopted, he came back and tried to understand what happened here and traced back the steps to see where adoption first took hold and try to put together the mechanics and see what was the catalyst. And what he found was that the farmers at the time were not responding to education campaigns and pamphlets and case studies and things like that. They were watching each other. And they weren't specifically just watching any farmer. They weren't watching just the guy who'll try anything. They weren't watching the guy who is just curious and wants to see, hey, what's up with this new seed? They were watching very specific farmers. The ones that were well respected, well networked, the ones that were seen as competent but not reckless. The kind of farmer whose neighbors watched what they planted in the spring and studied what their yield was at the end of that season. When those farmers tried the hybrid seed corn and their yields came in later in the year and they could actually see, the rest of the farmers could actually see the proof, that is when they decided to change their behavior. The influence from these specific farmers was more impactful and more important to the farming community than any government pamphlet, than any researchers, than any educational seminars that they went to. The message was coming from someone who owned a farm like them, someone who lived like them, someone who was influential in a very specific way. And in each farming community, they had that kind of farmer. They had that kind of person. In each community, there was a system of connected individuals watching specific individuals and how they moved and which behaviors they adopted and the result of those behaviors. And at that point, it would take hold across the system. And so Rogers went on to formalize his findings into what he later called the diffusion of innovations, where he explains why and at what rate new ideas and new innovations spread throughout communities. And so if that is how change moves, then what does that mean for you as an innovator in this industry? It means that as the manufacturer, it is not your job to try and convince everyone collectively. What you might want to focus on is finding that specific individual, that person that is the equivalent of that Iowa farmer, that person in your market, that builder, contractor, developer that has that combination of credibility, network density, and visibility. He is the GC that everyone watches, that everyone knows and is connected to, whose opinions are taken seriously, whose projects get featured in various different either community gatherings or even in the trade associations. When that individual has a successful experience with your product, you don't need to go and tell everyone because they're already watching. They're already studying that person's moves. They're already studying their results. They're already studying their projects. That kind of information travels further than any marketing could ever do because it's coming from someone who is trusted and someone who has nothing to sell. If you can find that person, that builder, that contractor in your market or in your region and ensure that they have a genuinely successful first experience. You have to be intentional in ensuring that they are successful with using your product and that the results speak for themselves. That in itself is worth more than 1,000 different sales conversations that you'll ever have. So Everett Rogers, through his looking back at what happened in Iowa, discovered that change moved through specific people and not through official channels. And about 50 years later, a writer by the name of Malcolm Gladwell looked back at another historical event and found similar patterns. And here is how the story of that event goes. It's April 1775 and the British soldiers are moving on Lexington and Concord. Two men ride out from Boston to go and warn the American colonists. Paul Revere heads northwest and William Dawes heads south. Same night, same message, same urgency. The British are coming. Y'all better get ready. Both men are committed, they are brave, and they cover lots of ground throughout the night. And by morning, the militias that were warned by Paul Revere are ready and mobilized. They engage the British soldiers in combat and they fight until they retreat. The ones that were warned by William Dawes, however, barely moved. There was barely a reaction from them. Why is that? So Malcolm Gladwell tells this story in his book, The Tipping Point. And if you haven't read it, it's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. And in this book, he tries to dissect this reaction. The same night, same message, same stakes. Why is it that one group that received the message reacted so quickly and the other group barely had a reaction? And the instinct is to think maybe one of the messengers was a bit more articulate. Maybe they were a bit more convincing. Maybe it's the way that they framed the message. But that's not it. That's not what happened here. Paul Revere had only one message, 4 words. The British are coming. That was it. There was no slide deck. There was no embellishment. He wasn't louder. He wasn't more animated with his message. The difference here was the messenger. It was who he was and not necessarily how he articulated his message. Because you see, Paul Revere wasn't just a silversmith. He was what Malcolm Gladwell later calls a connector. Someone who is embedded simultaneously in multiple social networks. He knew the artisans. He knew the carpenters. He knew the fishermen. He knew the merchants. He knew the political organizers. He was a member of at least 5 or 6 different social clubs in Boston. So when he knocked on doors in the middle of the night, People already knew him and trusted him. And they already understood if Paul Revere is at my door in the middle of the night, whatever is happening is serious and needs to be acted upon immediately. William Dawes knocked on similar doors, but because he wasn't known, he didn't have the same social networks, he was a stranger to the people that he was talking to in the middle of the night. And later, a sociologist named Mark Granovetter developed a framework that explains this behavior. And he called it the threshold of collective behavior. And the basic idea is that different people require different amounts of social proof in order to move or in order to change their behavior. Some people will move or change on the word of one trusted individual, and others need to see 3 or more neighbors move first. Others need to see 7. Others need to see 10. But here's the critical mechanism. If the first signal comes from someone with enough network density, a connector like Paul Revere, it triggers the low threshold people immediately. And once they move, they become the visible signal that the medium threshold people need to see for them to move. And then once they move, the rest of the people move, and it continues to kind of cascade across the system. And so in this instance, Paul Revere didn't just deliver a message. He triggered a sequence of network threshold signals that then continued to spread rapidly across the network. And so what we can learn from both of these historical events, the Iowa farmer story and the Paul Revere story, is that change does not move through channels or messages. Change moves through people, and not all people move it equally. And the ones who tip the system aren't necessarily the loudest or the most articulate. They're the ones whose decisions are visible to the right people in the right networks and in the right moment. And so when you look at your market and you look at your region and the people that you talk to on a regular basis, the question isn't how can I get my message to them? What channels can I use to continue pumping out information to them? Your question should be, who is my Paul Revere? Who is that individual that will actually tip the system? And so let's talk about what you can do going forward. And here's where I'm not going to tell you which materials to begin with or which projects to target. You know your market better than I do. What I am going to advise you on is how to approach the next conversation differently. First, you want to stop focusing on the functional specifications of your product, all of the things that make your product the better product. And you want to start focusing on the network. Instead of asking, how do I make a better case? How do I audit my message? How do I make this sound better? You want to start thinking about which individuals are being watched by the people that I want to adopt my system. Who are the builders whose peers show up to their building sites uninvited just to see how it's coming along? Whose name comes up when builders are making decisions? Whose opinion gets referred to or quoted in rooms where they aren't even participating? Take note of those people and have them in your radar. And then once you have that, you want to design their experience differently. You want to make every effort to make sure that they're going to be successful and that they're going to have a fantastic experience working with you, with your company, with your factory, and with your product. And so whatever resources you have that are going to enhance the experience of this one individual, you want to make sure that you commit 100% to that project. And this is not just to impress them or to, kind of give them special treatment. This is what is going to cascade that message. This is a message that you're sending to the rest of the population that is watching, that this is how you operate. This is what your product does. And these are the outcomes that they will also receive when they use your product. And so I want to come back to where we started, that really frustrating feeling of having a superior product that has been proven, that has delivered results, and you're still having a very difficult time having conversations with builders about it. You're still feeling that every conversation is like pulling teeth. It's like walking uphill. It's like having to convince them of what should be obvious. And that frustration is valid. I don't want to minimize it. But I hope the stories that I have told here have kind of convinced you that the system is not broken. The individuals and the builders that are resisting your product aren't just trying to be difficult. They're waiting for a signal from that person that they're watching. And what that means is that the way forward is not louder, bigger, different channels, marketing, or even giving more proof and more data that your product is superior. The way forward is finding that one individual whose adoption of your system gives permission to everyone else that is watching him. The way forward is not wishing that we're going to flip a switch and the industry is going to change. That switch does not exist. The cascade is available. It's just waiting for the right person to go first. All right. If you like the content of this video, please give me a giant thumbs up and leave a comment in the comment section. If you are not connected with me on LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn and let us have a broader conversation on this, on marketing, on growing your company and getting better adoption in the construction industry for modern methods of building and for offsite systems. That is all for today. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.